question over there. And he's coming.
Oh, okay.
I wonder if you could prognosticate the future a little bit. Are we likely to have a second dip? Will the government continue to throw packets of money to the perpetrators? And what do you see in the future happening to us?
Well, that's obviously the toughest question of the evening, particularly predicting the precise pattern of output. You know, my personal view is we won't get a second dip, the recession, not officially, not consecutive quarters of contraction, but unemployment is going to stay high into 2011 and even into 2012. So it's going to feel much like a protracted recession on the unemployment and unemployment side. The bankers are going to need a lot of money. You know, as we've been discussing, they have very strong market share. Interest rates in the short term remain low, which means deposit rates will also remain low, and they'll make them very nice money spread. Their trading will be high. They will do well in emerging markets. The American bankers have stayed away, we think, from most of the mess in Europe, although, to be honest, no one can tell you what is the true position of US banks relative to European banks, for example, through derivative trade. But it looks like the system will continue to recover, but it will also head in very dangerous directions. I think there'll be a lot of local risk-taking by other banks, fueled in part by capital, because they're now seen as too big to fail. Too big to fail is a very descriptive term. People lend to you because they think you are backed by the US government. That's JP Morgan Chase, Citigroup, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley. They're all definitely in that group. And they don't have an incentive to be careful. They know they have a backstop, they know they'll be protected if things go badly. And, you know, we've seen this movie before. We saw it, a version, very early version in the 1970s, when they recycled so-called petrodollars from the oil exporters into Latin America and Eastern Europe. We saw a version of it in the 1980s where US commercial real estate went boom and then bust. We saw a version in the 1990s with the so-called Asian financial crisis. And we saw it again in the 2000s. So this is at least once a decade experience. And the indications are that whatever firewalls and protections we had left in the 70s and 80s, they were swept away in the 1990s. And they don't exist now. They didn't exist around the subprime mortgage craze. And they're not being reinstated. The financial reform legislation constitutes, in my view, baby steps towards real reform. So this is very dangerous. It doesn't mean that we go flat. It doesn't mean that nothing happens. It means you come back, you boom, you build up risk, the bankers become overconfident again, and they get massive bonuses. And then you get another crash. So it's the boom-bust cycle that worries me, and it worries a lot of other people around the world who work on these issues. Both people working at the executive or academics. It should worry the administration more. It should worry the Senate. And you, I think, should be pressing for them really tough to try and deal with this before we have another, or a second, Great Depression.
One quick one. Okay, just quickly.
Okay, I was just wondering about these banks. How many of them are like the large corporations and don't even pay any income tax to the United States that have a home office in the Cayman Islands and just ripping us off that much more?
Well, the big banks are U.S. Tax entities. But it's a good question how much tax they pay. It's a very good question, by the way, how much tax their top executives pay. That's one question that has not been asked I think, forcefully enough in the Senate. If you remember, or if you've heard about the hearings in the 1930s, where they really exposed to people what the banks had been up to during the 1920s, some of the most telling questions there were about how much tax, for example, JP Morgan Jr. had actually paid. It turned out he didn't pay any tax. He found various clever ways to get around paying tax. And if you look carefully, if we look carefully, if we push for more details on the tax actually paid by the top 1% of our income distribution, I think we'll be quite shocked by how little they pay.
Yeah.
And I think you'll find a lot of it is legal. A lot of it is what very clever lawyers can do for you. And it's very bad. Again, absolutely undermines the...
And it depends on all of us to put the pressure on them. So I'm going to thank you so much today. We will keep up the pressure, I promise you. And we'll read the baseline scenario, right, everyone? Thanks so much, Dr. Johnson.
Okay, and Dan, I would be very happy to talk with you guys again. This is I think, a very good way for us to stay in touch with each other. You can also send me, you can send me email, you can contact us through Baseline Scenario. We're very happy. You know, particularly if there are questions you think we're not addressing, numbers that people want out there, we are absolutely a resource for everybody who's trying to push for reform.